The last normal morning of my life smelled like pancakes and dog fur. I remember that because I've tried to go back to it 1,000 times since. Tried to live inside those 20 minutes before everything changed. And every time I reach for it, the smell is what comes first. Buttermilk batter on the griddle and the warm, slightly sour scent of Goose's coat where he'd been sleeping against the heating vent all night. Goose was a 4-year-old German Shepherd mix we'd adopted from a rescue outside Harrisburg when I was 13. He wasn't trained for anything useful. He was afraid of plastic bags. He once ate an entire loaf of bread off the counter and threw up on my backpack. But he was mine in the way that mattered. He slept in my doorway, followed me to the bathroom, pressed his skull against my shin when I sat at the kitchen table doing homework. I was 16 that October, and Goose was the only living thing in our house that never made me feel like I was being evaluated. My father was already in the kitchen when I came down. That was unusual. He worked early shifts at the water treatment plant on Route 15 and normally left before I woke. But that Thursday, he was home, standing at the stove with a spatula in one hand and his phone in the other, scrolling something with his thumb while the pancakes bubbled. He didn't look up when I sat down. "No school today," he said. I laughed. "Yeah, okay. I mean it." He set the phone face down on the counter. "I called the office. Told them you had a fever." I stared at him. My father was not a rule breaker. He'd once driven back to a gas station to return 60 cents in wrong change. He ironed his work shirts on Sunday nights. He did not pull his daughter out of school on a Thursday for no reason. "Why?" "Because I need you home today." He slid a plate toward me. 2 pancakes, butter already melting. "Eat." I looked for Goose. He wasn't in his usual spot by the back door. His water bowl was full, but his food dish was empty and pushed against the wall at an angle, like it had been kicked. "Where's Goose?" My father didn't answer immediately. He turned off the burner, wiped his hands on the dish towel, and folded it into a rectangle before setting it on the counter. Everything deliberate, everything controlled. "He's in the basement." "Why?" "Because I put him there." The basement in our house was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed joists, a sump pump that ran every time it rained. We kept holiday decorations down there, old paint cans, a broken elliptical my mother had bought before she left. It was cold, and it was dark, and Goose hated it. He'd whine at the top of the stairs if you even opened the door. "Dad, he hates it down there. Why would you—" "Eat your breakfast, Mara." His voice wasn't angry. That was what scared me. It was flat. Controlled the way a doctor's voice is controlled when they're telling you something they've already decided you can't change. I'd heard that voice exactly once before, the night he told me my mother wasn't coming back from her sister's house in Delaware. Not that week, not ever. I ate the pancakes. They tasted like nothing. That was day 1. I didn't understand yet. I thought my father was having some kind of episode, maybe depression, maybe the beginning of something worse. I thought about calling my aunt. I thought about texting my friend Phoebe. I did neither. I sat in that kitchen and I watched my father check the locks on every window in the house, and I told myself it was nothing. And below us, Goose was silent. He should not have been silent. That was the first wrong thing, and I missed it. By noon, my father had moved the bookshelf from the living room to block the front door. Not in front of it, against it. Wedged between the door and the hallway wall so the door couldn't swing inward more than 2 inches. He did it without asking me to help. I watched from the stairs, hugging my knees, my phone open to a text thread with Phoebe that said nothing yet, because I didn't know what to type. "Dad, Go check that the bathroom window upstairs is locked, the one that sticks. Dad, what is happening? He straightened, breathing hard. The bookshelf was solid oak, a piece my grandmother had left us. He'd emptied it. First, the books were stacked in neat piles along the hallway floor. Hemingway, water engineering manuals, a Bible he never opened. There's going to be a problem, he said. A serious one. I need you to trust me for 3 days. After that, I'll explain everything. 3 days? Maybe less. A problem like what? Like a storm, like... Not a storm. He wiped his forehead with his wrist. Worse than a storm. But we are prepared, and we are going to be fine, as long as you listen and as long as we stay inside. Can you do that? I was 16. I had a chemistry test on Friday. Phoebe and I were supposed to go to the football game that weekend. My life was small and ordinary, and specifically shaped around routines my father had built for me since I was 11, and it became just the two of us. And now, he was standing in front of a barricaded door, asking me to abandon all of it on faith. 3 days, I said. 3 days. I went upstairs and locked the bathroom window. It took both hands and a hard shove. When I came back down, my father was in the kitchen filling every pot and container we owned with water from the tap. Soup pots, mixing bowls, the plastic pitcher we used for iced tea in summer. He filled them methodically and lined them along the counter. The water will stop, he said, not looking at me. Probably by tomorrow night. Electricity might last longer, but not by much. How do you know that? Because I know how the systems work. I've spent 20 years keeping them running. I know what happens when the people who run them stop showing up. That sentence landed in my chest like a stone in still water. The people who run them stop showing up. It wasn't hypothetical. He wasn't guessing. He knew something, had seen something, maybe at the plant, maybe in whatever he'd been reading on his phone that morning. I went to the basement door. It was closed, and there was a padlock on the hasp, a padlock I'd never seen before. Shiny brass, new. From behind the door, nothing. No whining, no scratching, no movement. Don't, my father said from behind me. I just want to check on him. He's fine. I fed him this morning. There's water down there. He's fine. Then why is there a lock? My father put his hand on my shoulder. His palm was dry and warm and steady. Because what's happening to people outside is going to start happening to animals too. And I need to know if Goose turns before I can know if we're safe. He's the canary, Mara. Do you understand? I didn't. Not then. The word turns meant nothing to me on that first day. I thought maybe he meant rabies. I thought maybe there was a disease at the plant, something in the water. I built explanations that fit inside the world I still believed in. 3 days, I said again. 3 days. He squeezed my shoulder once and walked back to the kitchen. Beneath the basement door, silence. Complete and wrong. That evening, the power was still on. The internet was still working. I sat on my bed with my laptop and searched for whatever my father wasn't telling me. The results were scattered and strange. A local news segment from a station in Baltimore about a mass disturbance at Johns Hopkins Hospital. The clip was 30 seconds long and ended abruptly mid-sentence. A Reddit thread from that morning with 40 comments, half of them deleted. The remaining ones talking about a co-worker who'd bitten a security guard at a Tyson processing plant in Virginia. A tweet from a congressional aide that said only, "Leaving D.C. tonight. Don't ask." No context, no follow-up. None of it cohered. It was like trying to read a book with every third page torn out. I could feel the shape of something massive pressing against the edges of normal information news anchors still talking about weather, sports scores still updating, Amazon still confirming my father's order of batteries that would never arrive, and behind all of it, this pressure. I texted Phoebe. "Hey, is anything weird happening?" She replied in 4 minutes. "Weird how?" Mr. Kessler gave us a pop quiz, LOL normal. Everything still sounding normal on her end. I almost typed, "My dad locked our dog in the basement and barricaded the front door." But I didn't. Because writing it would make it real. And also because some part of me, the part that had watched him fill pots with water, the part that had heard him say, "The people who run them stop showing up," that part already believed him. Believed that whatever he knew was true. And that saying it out loud to a girl whose biggest problem was a chemistry pop quiz would be a kind of cruelty. I closed the laptop at midnight. The lights still worked. The furnace still hummed. Outside my window, Maple Street looked exactly the way it always did. Porch lights on at the Hendersons. The Bowman's cat sitting on their mailbox, the streetlight at the corner buzzing its orange cone down onto empty asphalt. But there were no cars. I realized it then, leaning against the cold glass. In the 3 hours I'd been sitting there, not a single car had passed on Maple. Not the Uber drivers that usually cut on through. Not the teenagers who drove too fast after 10. Nothing. I found my father in the living room, sitting in the dark in his recliner. Not sleeping, just sitting with his hands on the armrests, staring at the barricaded front door. "No cars," I said. "No," he agreed. "Since when?" "Since about 8. 5 hours of silence on a street that carried through traffic to the interstate. 5 hours of nothing moving." "Dad, are people dying?" He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was the same controlled flatness from that morning. But underneath it, I heard something else, not fear exactly, but the effort of holding fear in place. "Some people are dying," he said. "Some people are becoming something else. I don't know the ratio yet. I don't think anyone does. Becoming something else. Yes. Like what? Violent, unresponsive to pain, single-minded, fast at first, then slower but persistent. The information I have is from people at the plant who were monitoring emergency channels before the channels went quiet." He said it like a report. Clinical, detached. But his hands on the armrests were gripping hard enough that I could see tendons. "Goose," I said. "If Goose is still Goose in 3 days, it means whatever this is doesn't cross species, or doesn't cross to dogs. Either way, we'll know. And if he's not still Goose..." My father looked at me for the first time since I'd come downstairs. In the dark, his eyes were just shapes, but I felt the weight of them. "Then we'll know that too." I went back upstairs. I pressed my ear to the floor of my bedroom, which was directly above the basement. I listened for 5 minutes. Nothing. Not a breath, not a whimper, not the click of nails on concrete. 3 days, my father had said. That was 72 hours to learn whether the world was ending and whether our dog was still our dog. I set my phone alarm for 6 a.m. and lay in the dark with my eyes open until it rang. Day 2 started with the power cutting out at 4:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because my alarm clock, the old digital one, with the red numbers that I kept as a backup, blinked once, showed 4:47 and went black. The furnace died mid-cycle. The refrigerator's hum vanished. The house settled into a silence so total that I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I lay in bed and listened to that silence. No cars, no furnace, no distant highway sound. No planes, and we lived under a flight path to the regional airport. The absence of aircraft noise was somehow the most terrifying thing. Planes meant systems, logistics, schedules, a world running on coordination. No planes meant all of that had stopped. My father knocked on my door at 5:15. 2 knocks, pause, 1 knock. A pattern he'd apparently decided on without telling me. "I'm awake," I said. He opened the door. He was fully dressed, work boots, canvas jacket, a headlamp around his neck that wasn't turned on yet. He looked like he'd been awake for hours. "Power's out. Won't be coming back." "I know. I have the camp stove set up in the kitchen. Propane for about a week if we're careful. We eat twice a day. We heat water for drinking. We don't waste fuel." I nodded. He was giving me instructions because instructions were the language he spoke. This was how he loved it, through preparation, through anticipating the next problem before it arrived. I'd resented it for years. The emergency kits in both cars, the go bag in my closet I'd never opened. The first aid course he'd made me take at 14. All of it had felt like paranoia, like a father who couldn't let the world be safe enough. Now it felt like the only thing standing between me and whatever was outside. "Dad, I need to check on Goose." "No. It's been over 24 hours. If he needs water." I put 2 gallons down there. "And a bag of food. He has what he needs." "Then why won't you let me see him?" He stepped into my room and sat on the edge of my bed. The mattress dipped under his weight. He smelled like coffee. He must have heated water already. "Because if he's turned, opening that door means risking you. And I won't risk you for anything. Not for Goose, not for me, not for anyone outside." "Has something happened outside?" He hesitated. That was new. My father didn't hesitate. Around 2 this morning, someone came to the back door. I watched from the upstairs bathroom window. A man. I didn't recognize him. He stood on the patio for about 20 minutes, facing the door. Not knocking, not trying the handle, just standing. My skin went cold. What did he do? Nothing. He stood there, and then he walked toward the Hendersons' house. Slowly, like he was following a sound I couldn't hear. Was he one of them? Was he turned? I don't know. He was upright. He was moving with intent. But something about the way he stood, the stillness of it, the patience. People don't stand like that, Mara. Not in the cold, not at 2 a.m., not facing a door with no reason. I pulled my blanket tighter around my shoulders. The house was already cooling without the furnace. October in Pennsylvania meant the temperature would drop through the 40s by nightfall. "We stay quiet today," my father said. "No lights visible from outside. We move between rooms carefully. If you hear anything at all, from outside or from below, you come find me immediately. Don't investigate alone." "From below," I repeated. "You think Goose might—" "I don't know what I think yet. That's why we wait." He stood, squeezed my foot through the blanket, and left. I sat in the gray pre-dawn light of my room and felt the house around me like a body holding its breath. I spent the morning of day 2 cataloging what we had. Not because my father asked me to, he'd already done it, I was sure. But because I needed something to do with my hands and my mind that wasn't listening for sounds from the basement. In the kitchen, 14 cans of soup, 8 cans of vegetables, 6 cans of tuna, a box of crackers, peanut butter, 2 jars of pasta sauce, a pound of dried rice, a bag of lentils. In the hallway closet, the camping gear my father kept organized in labeled bins, 2 sleeping bags, a water filtration pump, a first aid kit the size of a shoebox, A hand crank radio. The radio. I carried it to the kitchen table and turned the crank until the indicator light glowed green, then scanned through the frequencies. Static, static, static. Then, on the AM band, a loop. An automated voice, female, calm, reading a message that repeated every 90 seconds. This is the emergency alert system. Shelter in place. Do not travel. Do not open your doors to unknown individuals. If a member of your household exhibits signs of infection, including sudden fever, loss of verbal response, or unprovoked aggression, isolate them immediately and do not attempt physical restraint. This message will repeat. I listened to it 4 times. Each repetition felt like a hand pressing harder on my chest. Do not attempt physical restraint. What did that mean? That people had tried and failed? That whatever was happening to people made them strong enough that restraint was useless? Sudden fever, loss of verbal response, unprovoked aggression. Goose had been silent for over 30 hours. My father appeared in the kitchen doorway. He'd heard the radio, I could tell by the way his jaw was set. That's been looping since last night, he said. No live broadcasts, no updates, just the loop. Signs of infection, I said. It says fever, loss of verbal response, aggression. Dad dogs can't give verbal responses. How would we even know? He pulled a chair out and sat across from me. In the gray light from the window, I could see how tired he looked. Not sleepless tired. Something deeper. The exhaustion of carrying knowledge he couldn't share fully. There are other signs, he said. Behavioral changes. Goose was a vocal dog. He whined at everything. The door, the mailman, the cat next door, his food bowl. 24 hours of silence from a dog like that is a data point. A data point. I'm not being cold, Mara. I'm being precise, because precise is what keeps us alive right now. You're using our dog as a test subject. The words came out sharper than I intended, and I saw them land. His eyes changed, not hurt exactly, but the flinch of someone who'd already convicted himself of the same charge. Yes, he said. I am. At least he didn't lie. At least he gave me that. And if he passes the test? If 3 days go by and he's fine? Then we know the vector is human to human only. Then we open the door, we let him out, and we have a dog who might hear things coming before we do. And if he doesn't pass? My father reached across the table and took the radio from my hands. He turned the crank twice more, as if checking that the message hadn't changed. It hadn't. Then we deal with it, he said. Together. But his eyes went to the kitchen drawer, the one where he kept the utility knife, the flashlight, the roll of duct tape. I saw him look, and he saw me seeing him look, and neither of us said anything about it. I spent the rest of the afternoon reading by the window. A novel I'd been assigned for English class. I read 30 pages without absorbing a single sentence. The sound came at dusk on day 2. Not from outside, from below. I was in the living room, wrapped in a sleeping bag on the couch because the temperature had dropped to the point where I could see my breath. My father was in the kitchen, heating water on the camp stove for instant oatmeal, our one evening meal. The scrape of the pot on the burner, the click of the igniter, the small sounds of survival. Then, a thump. Single, heavy, from the basement, like a body hitting a wall. I froze. My father appeared in the doorway instantly, spatula still in hand, eyes wide and fixed on the floor beneath our feet. We waited. 10 seconds, 20. Another thump, harder. Then a sound I can only describe as dragging, something heavy pulled across concrete, slow and deliberate. "Goose," I whispered. My father held up his hand. "Don't move. Don't speak." We stood in silence for 2 full minutes. The dragging stopped, then started again, closer to the stairs this time. I could feel the vibration through the floor. Whatever was moving down there was pressing against the walls, moving in a pattern that wasn't random but wasn't purposeful either. Like something pacing without knowing why. Then the sound I'll never unhear. A vocalization from below that came from Goose's throat, but belonged to nothing I recognized. Not a bark, not a growl, not a whine. A low, continuous, rattling exhalation air forced out through a constriction. A sound that vibrated at a frequency my body interpreted as wrong before my brain could name it. My father set the spatula down. He walked to the basement door. He pressed his palm flat against it and stood there, listening, his face inches from the wood. The sound from below changed pitch. Rose. Became something close to a moan, but thinner. Stretched, like a recording played at the wrong speed. And beneath it, the scratch of nails. Not the familiar tick-tick-tick of Goose's claws on linoleum. This was slow, deliberate, continuous, a single claw drawn downward against the underside of the door. My father stepped back. His face, when he turned to me, was the face of a man who'd built a hypothesis and watched it confirm in the worst possible direction. "It crossed," he said. 2 words. They dismantled my world in 2 words. "Maybe he's just scared," I said. My voice was thin. I knew what I was saying wasn't true, even as I said it. Dogs don't make that sound when they're scared. Dogs whimper, they pant, they bark. They don't produce that rattling, toneless drone that was still coming from below us, that was filling the house like a gas. "Mara, that is not fear. You know animals. You know that's not fear." He was right. I'd grown up with dogs my whole life. I'd volunteered at the rescue where we'd found Goose. I'd held frightened animals, aggressive animals, sick animals. Nothing sounded like this. This was a sound that existed outside the range of any behavior I'd ever witnessed. "What do we do?" I asked. "Nothing tonight. The door holds, the lock holds. He can't get out." My father's voice was steady, but I saw his hand tremble when he reached for the counter. "We sleep upstairs, both of us. My room. We put something heavy against the bedroom door." "He's just a dog, Dad. Even if he's infected, he's 70 pounds. He can't break through a locked door." "I don't know what he can do now," my father said. "And neither do you. So we take precautions until we understand more." We ate oatmeal in silence while the sound from the basement rose and fell beneath us. Every few minutes, it would stop entirely. And the silence was worse, because in the silence, I could imagine Goose down there. In the dark, confused, afraid, still himself. And us up here choosing not to help him. That was the thought I couldn't escape on night 2. That maybe he was still Goose. That maybe he was suffering, and we were simply listening. I didn't sleep. I lay in my father's bed. He took the floor beside the door, his back against the dresser we'd pushed in front of it, and I stared at the ceiling and listened. The sound from the basement was intermittent now. Long stretches of silence, punctuated by that scraping, that rattling exhalation, that single claw on wood. Each time it started again, my whole body seized as if shocked. Around 3 a.m, a different sound. From outside this time. Not the man standing silently on the patio, this was movement, fast, on the street. Running footsteps. Then a scream. High, sharp, cut off. Then nothing. My father was already sitting up, In the dim moonlight from the window, I could see his profile, rigid, turned toward the sound. Who? Don't know. Don't move. We waited. 5 minutes. 10. No more sounds from outside. It's happening everywhere, I said. Not a question. Yes. The neighbors, the Hendersons, the Bowmans. I don't know who specifically, but yes, everywhere. I thought about Mrs. Henderson, who brought us banana bread at Christmas. About the Bowman's cat on the mailbox. Was it still there? Could cats turn? Could everything? I thought about Phoebe, 4 blocks away, her house with the flimsy screen door, and her parents who trusted the world to stay predictable. Dad, I need to know. How did you know before everyone else? He was quiet for a long time. I thought he wasn't going to answer. Tuesday, he said finally. 2 days before I kept you home. I was at the plant, night shift. A man came in through the east gate, one of our maintenance workers, Terrell. He'd been out sick for a day. He came back and he wasn't right. Walked wrong. Didn't respond when we called his name. Security tried to stop him and he... My father paused, swallowed. He bit through a man's forearm, through the jacket, through the skin, through the muscle, like it was nothing, like his jaw was hydraulic. I felt nausea rise and pressed my hand over my mouth. Security put him down. Tased him first, it didn't work. They shot him. The county hazmat team came. They told us it was an isolated incident, drug-related. But I stayed late. I listened to the emergency frequencies on the plant system. And what I heard, Mara, it wasn't isolated. Baltimore, Richmond, Philadelphia. Dozens of reports, hundreds, all the same pattern. Fever, silence, then violence. And you just came home and locked the dog in the basement? I came home, I researched for 6 hours. I confirmed the pattern from every source I could access, and then I prepared. The dog was part of preparing. I needed a controlled subject to determine species crossover. Everything I did because I love you, and because I needed to give us the best information possible to survive. His voice cracked on the last word. Just barely. Just enough that I heard the father beneath the engineer. I believe you, I said. And I did. That was the terrible thing. I believed every word, and I understood the logic. And it still felt like a betrayal of Goose, of the man standing on the patio, who might have needed help, of the world my father had decided to lock out on my behalf before I could choose for myself. Dawn came gray and cold. Day 3, the day he'd promised to explain, the day I already understood. Morning light revealed what dark had hidden. From the upstairs bathroom window, the only window with a clear view of the street, I counted them. 3 figures on Maple, standing in the road at intervals. Not together, not communicating, just standing. Facing different directions, swaying with a motion so slight it could have been wind, except there was no wind. They were people. I could see that. Clothes, hair, shoes. A woman in a bathrobe 2 houses down. A man in a reflective vest. A jogger, maybe. Or a crossing guard. A teenager in a hoodie, standing directly under the streetlight that no longer worked. None of them moved with purpose. None of them spoke. They simply existed in the road, like objects placed there, swaying, waiting for a stimulus I couldn't identify. Don't let them see movement in the window, my father said behind me. He was watching too, standing back from the glass so his shape wouldn't be visible. They respond to motion. Possibly sound, but definitely motion. How do you know? I watched for 2 hours before you woke up. A squirrel ran across the Hendersons' lawn. The woman in the bathrobe crossed 30 feet in under 4 seconds to reach it. She was standing still, and then she was moving, and there was no transition between the two states. No acceleration, just 0 to full speed. I looked at the woman in the bathrobe. She was back to swaying. Whatever had happened with the squirrel was over. Did she catch it? Yes. I didn't ask what happened after. We moved away from the window and went downstairs. In the kitchen, my father lit the camp stove and heated water. The routine of it, the click, the blue flame, the slow curl of steam, felt obscene against what we'd just witnessed. Day 3, I said. Day 3. You said you'd explain everything. I think you already understand most of it. I want to hear you say it, all of it, not the engineer version, the real version. He poured water into 2 mugs, instant coffee, the last of it. He wrapped both hands around his mug and looked at me across the table. An infectious agent, viral, fungal, something new. I don't know, its biology is rewriting the behavior of everyone it touches. It spreads through bites, possibly through fluid contact. Incubation appears to be 6 to 18 hours. Once it takes hold, the person stops being a person. They become a predator with no higher function. They're not dead. They breathe, they bleed, they decay slowly, but they're not conscious, not in any way that matters. And Goose confirmed what I feared. It crosses species. Whatever this is, it's not limited to human neurology. A dog can carry it, which means we cannot trust any animal contact either. From the basement, as if on cue, that sound. The rattle, the low, wrong exhalation. Goose, or what had been Goose, pressing against the door. We need to deal with him, my father said. No, Mara, not yet. You said 3 days. Today's 3 days. What if it's temporary? What if he gets better? My father's face told me everything his mouth wouldn't say. But he nodded. 12 more hours. We observed through the door. If nothing changes, 12 hours, I agreed. I didn't believe it would change. But I needed those hours. I needed time to make the truth real inside me. To accept that the animal I loved was gone, and that my father had known it would happen, and had built this test while I slept. At noon on day 3, the Hendersons' front door opened. We watched from the upstairs bathroom, my father and I side by side, barely breathing, eyes fixed on the house across the street. Mrs. Henderson came out. She was in her nightgown. She'd been in her nightgown since at least yesterday. I realized I'd seen her through their kitchen window the previous morning, standing at her sink, not moving. I'd told myself she was daydreaming. She wasn't daydreaming now. She walked to her lawn, stopped, and stood with that same sway as the others. The 3 figures in the road didn't react to her. She didn't react to them. They existed in parallel, unconnected, each waiting for their own trigger. Then Mr. Henderson appeared in the doorway. He was not turned. I could tell immediately because of how he moved, halting, terrified, clutching the door frame. He was looking at his wife, and his whole body was shaking. "Don't," my father whispered. Mr. Henderson stepped off the porch. "Carol?" His voice carried clear in the dead silent street. "Carol, honey, come inside." The 3 figures in the road turned. All 3, simultaneously, like a single organism responding to a signal. They oriented toward the sound, toward Mr. Henderson on his porch, his hands outstretched toward his wife. No, my father said. Mrs. Henderson turned too. But she didn't look at her husband the way the others did, head tilted, tracking. She looked at him the way a predator looks at a noise. And then she moved. My father pulled me away from the window. He wrapped his arms around my head and turned me toward his chest and held me there, while sounds came from outside, that I will not describe, because describing them would make them permanent in a way I can't allow. I will say only that Mr. Henderson's voice rose once, high and breaking, and then stopped. And the silence after was worse than anything that preceded it. We stood in the bathroom, my father holding me, both of us shaking for what felt like hours, but was probably 3 minutes. "This is why," he said into my hair. "This is why I locked the door. This is why I kept you home. This is why Goose is in the basement. Because I saw Terrell on Tuesday, and I saw what's coming, and I could not let that happen to you. Do you understand? I could not." I understood. God help me, I understood completely. And I hated it. Hated that he was right. Hated that being right meant Goose was gone. Hated that the world had bent itself into a shape where a man locking a dog in a basement was an act of love, and a man walking toward his wife was a death sentence. "I understand," I said. He let me go. His eyes were wet. My father hadn't cried since my mother left. And even then I'd only seen it once, from the hallway, through a cracked door. Now he stood in the bathroom with tears on his face and didn't try to hide them. "Tonight," he said, "we deal with Goose tonight, and tomorrow we figure out what comes next." I nodded because there was nothing else to do. The afternoon passed in a strange suspended calm. We ate lentils from the pot, cold, because we were rationing propane. We sat in the living room with blankets around our shoulders and talked about things that didn't matter. My father told me about his first job out of college, a water treatment plant in New Mexico where the summer heat warped the pipes. I told him about a boy in my chemistry class who'd spilled sulfuric acid on his shoe and pretended he'd meant to. We laughed quiet, careful laughter, the kind that acknowledges its own absurdity. Below us, Goose had gone silent again. Since mid-morning, nothing. No thumps, no rattling, no claws. The silence should have been reassuring. It wasn't. It felt like something waiting. At 4 o'clock, I made a decision. I want to see him. My father looked up from the camp stove, where he was calculating propane use with a pencil on the back of a receipt. His expression wasn't surprise, it was resignation. "Why?" "Because if we have to do what I think we have to do, I want to see what we're doing it to. I need to know it's not Goose anymore. I need to see it. You can hear it's not Goose. Hearing isn't enough. I need to look." He set the pencil down. "There's a gap under the door. 1/4 inch, maybe slightly more. I can remove the bottom hinge pin and angle the door open 2 inches, no more, while the lock holds the top. It won't fit through 2 inches. We can look with the flashlight." "Okay." We went to the basement door together. My father retrieved a hammer and a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer, the same drawer where the utility knife lived. I saw him glance at the knife, then leave it. A kindness or a deferral. He knelt at the base of the door, tapped the hinge pin carefully, working it upward millimeter by millimeter. The metal scraped quietly. From below, nothing. No response to the sound. The pin came free. My father gripped the base of the door and pulled it inward against the padlock's resistance. 2 inches of gap opened at the bottom, a narrow triangle of black space where the hinge had been. He clicked the flashlight on and angled the beam downward through the gap. I dropped to my stomach and looked. The basement was a wreck. The holiday decoration boxes were torn apart, shredded cardboard, broken ornaments, tinsel scattered like metallic veins across the concrete. The broken elliptical was overturned. Claw marks, deep, deliberate, parallel lines, ran along the base of every wall within the flashlight's reach. And Goose. He was in the far corner, pressed against the wall. His body was wrong. Not deformed, positioned wrong. He was standing, but his weight was distributed in a way no healthy dog stands. His front legs were braced too wide, his head hung too low, and his spine curved upward at the shoulders in a way that suggested the muscles beneath had reorganized themselves around a new priority. His eyes caught the flashlight beam. They reflected it, but not the green gold I knew. A flat, milky white. Cataracts in 18 hours, or something wearing the shape of cataracts. He didn't move toward the light. He didn't growl. He stood in that broken posture, and he breathed that rattling, low, continuous breath. And his mouth hung open, and from it dripped a substance I couldn't identify in the beam's limited reach. That wasn't Goose. I knew it in my body before my brain confirmed it. The animal in that basement wore Goose's fur and stood on Goose's legs, but the thing that had made him Goose, the personality, the fear of plastic bags, the way he pressed his head against my shin, was gone. Replaced by whatever drove that breathing, that patience, that terrible stillness. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay. I see." My father slid the door closed, replaced the pin, stood and put his hand on my back as I rose from the floor. I was crying. I hadn't realized until I stood and felt the cold wetness on my cheeks. I was crying for a dog that had been gone for 2 days. Crying for the fact that I'd needed to see it with my own eyes because my father's word wasn't enough. Crying because the world had become a place where seeing was the only believing left. My father built a plan the way he built everything, methodically, accounting for variables, leaving margin for error. He sat at the kitchen table that evening with a pencil and paper and drew a diagram of the basement while I watched. "The window well," he said, pointing to a rectangle on his sketch. "Egress window on the south side. It's small, but if I open it from outside or reach in from the window well, I can create an exit path. Drive him out into the yard rather than up into the house. And then?" He didn't answer immediately. He was drawing arrows, the path from the basement corner to the window, the angle of the well, the distance to the fence line. "Dad, and then what?" "Then I handle it." "Handle it how?" He set the pencil down, looked at me with eyes that were asking permission for something he'd already decided. "The axe," I said. "It's fast. It's certain. He won't suffer. He's already suffering, or whatever's in there is suffering, or it's not. I don't know which is worse." My father nodded slowly. "I don't either. But I know that thing in the basement is a risk we can't keep contained indefinitely. The door is interior hollow core. It's not rated for sustained force. If he escalates, if whatever is driving him decides the door is an obstacle worth testing, it won't hold." I thought of the claw marks on the walls, parallel lines, deep enough to gouge concrete. What would those claws do to hollow core composite? "When?" "Tomorrow. First light. You stay inside, upstairs. I go around the outside, open the well cover, break the window from above, and give him a path out into the yard. When he comes through, I'm positioned above with enough leverage to end it in one motion. What if he doesn't come out? Then I seal the window and we reassess. What if he comes out faster than you expect?" My father folded the diagram into quarters. "Then I'll be fast too." I wanted to argue. I wanted to find a flaw in his logic, a reason to wait, a possibility he'd missed where Goose might still be saved. But I'd seen those eyes, that posture, that dripping jaw. There was no saving what was left in that basement. There was only containing it or ending it, and containing it had an expiration date. "I want to say goodbye," I said. "You already did. When you looked through that gap, that was goodbye." He was right. But it didn't feel like enough. It felt like something owed that I couldn't name and couldn't pay. That night, lying in my father's bed again, I talked to Goose through the floor. I whispered a monologue he couldn't hear or understand, directed at a thing that was no longer him, but I said it anyway. I told him he was a good dog. I told him I was sorry about the basement and the dark and the cold concrete. I told him I loved the way he leaned against my legs, the way he was afraid of everything harmless and brave about nothing important. I told him I understood why my father had done what he did. And I told him I forgave the man downstairs for making Goose into a test. And I told him I wasn't sure that last part was true, but I was trying. Below me, nothing. The rattle had stopped hours ago. The silence of day three's end was absolute, as if whatever lived in Goose's body had settled into a dormancy I couldn't predict. I fell asleep mid-sentence, talking to a ghost in a dog's body, and woke to the sound of glass breaking. The crash came from below, basement level. The sound of glass fracturing and something hitting the ground outside a thump, followed by rapid, scrabbling movement on gravel. I was on my feet before I was fully conscious. The room was dark, deep night, no moon, no streetlights. I couldn't see the clock because there was no clock anymore. Just darkness and the sound of my own breathing. And from outside, a sound that shouldn't have been there. Running. Something running in the yard, below my father's bedroom window. Fast, uneven, claws on frozen ground. "Dad," I called out, but the room was empty. The dresser was pushed away from the door. The door was open. He was already gone. I ran to the hallway. The house was cold and black, and I moved by memory 12 steps to the stairs, hand on the banister, down, around the landing, down again. The kitchen, the back door. The back door was open, not broken. Unlocked and open, cold October air flooding in, and beyond it the yard, a gray expanse of dead grass bordered by the wooden fence my father had built 3 summers ago. I saw him, my father, standing in the middle of the yard in his boots and canvas jacket, the axe in his hands, facing the south side of the house where the basement window well was. The well cover was flipped open, a black rectangle in the ground. And the window, even from 20 feet away, I could see the window was shattered outward, glass scattered on the ground, the frame bent. Goose had broken out, on his own. In the night, without provocation, the thing that had been Goose had put itself through a glass window and escaped into the yard. But Goose was not in the yard. My father turned when he heard me. "Get inside." "Where is he?" "The fence." He pointed with the axe handle. A section of the wooden fence on the west side was broken, boards splintered outward, a gap large enough for a 70-pound animal to force through. Beyond it, the Bowman's property. Beyond that, the street. Beyond that, the dark. "He's gone?" I asked, my voice rising. My father crossed the yard toward me, his strides long, the axe held low. "Inside. Now. He went through 10 minutes ago, maybe less. I heard the glass and came down, but he was already through the fence by the time I got out." "You were going to do it tomorrow. You had a plan." "He didn't wait for my plan." My father ushered me through the back door and closed it, locked it, leaned his weight against it. His breathing was ragged. The window was supposed to be his exit point tomorrow, controlled. He found it himself. He broke himself out. "Can he get back in?" "Not through the window. It's too high from outside without the well as a step down. And I'm boarding it now." He grabbed the hammer from the counter. "Stay inside. Don't leave this room." He went back out. I heard him working boards being nailed over the broken window, the sound of hammer strikes in the dark, fast and urgent. I stood in the kitchen with my arms wrapped around myself and stared at the basement door. It was still locked, still closed. Goose had bypassed it entirely, gone through the window well, rather than up through the house. Whether that was random, or whether some remnant of spatial memory had directed him toward the weakest exit point, I couldn't know. But it meant the lock had worked. The door had held. My father's precaution had not failed. Except now Goose was out there, in the neighborhood, in the dark, among the swaying figures in the road, and the things that had been the Hendersons, and the teenager in the hoodie, and whatever else moved through the night. And he was carrying it. Carrying the infection in a body that could run faster than a person, that could hear better, smell better, navigate the dark with senses we'd never match. My father came back inside, fingers bleeding from a splinter, breathing hard. He locked the door and braced a chair under the handle and turned to me. "Tomorrow," he said. "We leave." Leaving. The word felt impossible. Outside was death standing upright. Outside was Mrs. Henderson in her nightgown. And the sound that had ended Mr. Henderson, and now Goose, carrying whatever this was through the dark, bringing it to any animal he encountered. "Leave to where?" I asked. "Fort Indiantown Gap. National Guard installation, 70 miles northeast." My father was already moving through the house, pulling items from closets and shelves, assembling them on the kitchen table with the same deliberation he'd shown when filling pots with water 3 days ago. They'll have perimeter security. They'll be organizing civilian intake. It's the closest military asset large enough to still be functioning. How do you know it's functioning? I don't. But it's designed to operate independently of civilian infrastructure. It has its own water, its own power, its own communications. If anything is still running, it's there. I watched him pack. 2 backpacks, mine from school and his hiking pack from the closet. Water filtration, first aid, food for 3 days, the hand crank radio, a knife each, flashlights, extra batteries. He moved with a certainty that told me this part, the leaving, the route, the destination, had been in his mind since Tuesday. Since Terrell at the plant. Since before he'd locked Goose downstairs. "You planned for this too," I said. "I planned for every stage. Stage 1 was shelter in place. Stage 2 was assessment. Stage 3 is movement to a defensible location." "You could have told me." He stopped, a wool hat in one hand, a compass in the other. "I could have. And you would have spent 3 days terrified instead of 2. I gave you 1 day of almost normal. That was all I could offer. That's not, Dad. That's not your decision to make for me." "Yes, it is." His voice wasn't flat this time. It was raw. "You are 16. You are my daughter. And when the world is falling apart, yes, it is my decision what you know and when you know it. I will carry that. I've been carrying it since your mother left. I'll carry this too." The words hit me in a place I didn't expect. Not in anger, but in grief. Grief for the man who'd been carrying alone for 5 years. Who'd built go bags and taught first aid and learned which windows locked poorly, all while ironing shirts on Sunday nights and driving back to return 60 cents. Who'd turned his love into engineering, because engineering was the only language in which he trusted himself to be fluent. "Okay," I said. "What time?" 4 a.m., before light. They're less responsive in the cold, I've observed that. They sway more, move less, react slower. We go silent, we go north, we stay off the main roads. 70 miles on foot. We have bicycles in the garage. Of course we did. Of course he'd thought of that. I went upstairs one last time, stood in my bedroom and looked at the things I was leaving: the books, the posters, the desk where I'd done 5 years of homework, the carpet where Goose used to sleep by my door. I took nothing. There was nothing here that mattered more than what my father had already packed. When I came back down, he was sitting at the kitchen table with the 2 packs at his feet and the compass in his palm, waiting. "I'm sorry about Goose," he said. "I know. I loved him too." "I know, Dad." The basement was silent. The yard was silent. The street was silent. We waited for 4 a.m. in the dark, side by side, and I held my father's hand for the first time in years. We left at 4:07 a.m. The delay was because at 4 exactly, a figure walked past our house, visible through the side window as a dark shape moving south. Unhurried, and we pressed against the wall and waited for it to pass. 7 minutes of held breath before the street was clear again. The garage was attached to the house through a door in the kitchen. My father had staged the bicycles the night before, tires checked, chains oiled, packs strapped to the rear racks with bungee cords. He'd thought of everything. He always thought of everything. That was his gift and his isolation. We rolled the bikes out the side door of the garage, into the driveway, into the cold. October air hit my face like a slap. The street was empty. The figures from yesterday had drifted south during the night, following whatever gradient of sound or warmth they tracked. No swaying shapes under dead streetlights. No bathrobe woman on the Henderson lawn. Just frost on windshields, and silence so deep it hummed. My father pointed north. I nodded. We mounted the bikes and pushed off. No words, just the quiet chain tick of pedaling and the soft crunch of tires on cold asphalt. 3 blocks. 5. Past the elementary school where the flagpole stood bare. Past the gas station where a car sat with its driver door open and engine dead. Past the church where I'd gone to vacation Bible school at 8 years old. All empty, all still. The world looking exactly like itself, but emptied of the thing that made it alive. At the edge of town, where Maple connected to Route 34 North, my father stopped. He was straddling his bike, 1 foot on the pavement, looking back down the street we'd just ridden. Looking at the house, our house, small and dark at the end of the block, the only home I'd ever known. "Don't look back," I said. He turned to me. In the pre-dawn gray, his face was tired and lined and older than I'd noticed before. But his eyes were clear. "When did you get smarter than me?" "Tuesday," I said, "when you weren't watching." The smallest smile. Then he faced north and pedaled, and I followed. We rode for 2 hours before dawn broke. The road was empty. No cars, no bodies, no figures in the road. Just asphalt and fields, and the occasional farmhouse set back from the pavement, dark and silent, offering no information about whether they held the living or the dead or the changed. At dawn, we stopped in a barn off a side road, ate crackers and peanut butter in the hayloft while light crept across the valley below. My father spread a map on the hay and traced our route with his finger north through the ridges, avoiding towns, following fire roads and power line cuts. 2 days if we're lucky, he said. 3 if we're not. I looked at the map. 70 miles of rural Pennsylvania between us and whatever waited at Fort Indiantown Gap. 70 miles of unknown, of farms and forests and small towns that might be empty or might be filled with things standing in roads, waiting. But we were moving. We were together. And my father, my strange, obsessive, impossibly prepared father, had given me this. Not just survival, understanding. He'd made me look through the gap under the door, so I'd know what was real. He'd let me hold his hand in the dark, so I'd know he was still human beneath the engineering. 3 days in a locked house had taught me what he'd spent 5 years trying to say, in a language he couldn't speak. That love looks like locked doors and filled water pots and a dog in a basement. And that the person who sees the flood coming and builds the ark isn't cruel, they're just alone. In their knowing, until the rain starts. The rain had started, and we were riding north. We reached the fort on day 5. The gates were open, not unmanned, but understaffed. Soldiers waving vehicles and walkers through without processing, without clipboards, without questions. My father wheeled his bicycle through with one hand on the handlebar and one hand on my shoulder. And the soldier at the gate looked at us the way you look at rain when you've stopped counting drops. I think about Goose every day. Not the thing in the basement I've locked, that behind its own door in my mind. Padlocked, sealed. I think about the real Goose. The one who was afraid of plastic bags. The one who leaned. I think about the fact that my father used his life to buy us 3 days of certainty. That the test was necessary, and that knowing it was necessary doesn't make it forgivable, and that forgiveness may not be the right frame at all. My father saved my life with locked doors and hard math. He made choices before I could consent to them. He used an animal I loved as an instrument of information. And I am alive, because of it, breathing, pedaling, walking through gates, carrying his logic in my bones like a second skeleton. I don't know if I'll ever build an ark the way he does. But I know now that I'm the kind of person who survives inside one. And I don't know yet what to do with that inheritance.